Welcome to Revenge with Precious, where we share real stories of betrayal, resilience, and the courage to stand up for yourself. These are tales of people who refused to stay silent, who drew boundaries when love turned toxic, and who chose their peace over family obligation. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, these stories are for you. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you see your own life. Please, watch till the end. Let's get started. Obsolete infrastructure. That's what she called me in front of 40 people. I was sitting in the quarterly leadership summit when Victoria Hale, our new CEO, clicked to a slide titled Operational Deadweight. My photo appeared next to 3 others. Not a warning. Not a conversation. Just my face on a screen with the word redundant stamped across it like a death certificate. The conference room went silent except for the hum of the projector. I didn't stand up. I didn't cry. I just reached under the table and felt for my phone, opening the encrypted folder I'd labeled Vendor Authorization Matrix Final. Then I looked up at Victoria and said the only thing that mattered. I'll make sure everything is compliant before my access is revoked. She smiled like I just volunteered to clean out my own grave. What she didn't know was that compliance wasn't paperwork. It was the central nervous system of the entire company. And I just checked my pulse one last time before someone else tried to keep the heart beating without knowing where the arteries were. My name is Dana Cross. Procurement Compliance Officer for 7 years at Halcyon Tech, a mid-sized hardware manufacturer that supplied components to aerospace, medical devices, and defense contractors. You know, the kind of industries where one missing signature can ground an aircraft or halt a surgery. I didn't design circuit boards or pitch clients. I made sure every vendor we touched was certified, every shipment was legal, and every audit came back spotless. It wasn't glamorous. It was invisible until it wasn't. After Victoria's announcement, I walked back to my office with the same calm I used during audits. I didn't slam doors. I didn't send angry emails. I opened my laptop and pulled up a document I'd created 3 years ago during our ISO recertification. It was called Authorization Chain Continuity Protocol. Inside were the digital keys to every supplier relationship we had. 73 vendors across 19 countries. All of them required a certified compliance officer's authorization to renew contracts, update certifications, or modify shipment approvals. And every single one of those authorizations was tied to my biometric login and digital signature. Victoria Hale arrived 6 months ago with a reputation for transforming bloated operations into lean machines. She'd gutted 2 companies before ours, slashing headcount by 30% and boosting short-term stock prices. The board loved her. She wore charcoal blazers and spoke in TED Talk soundbites. We're not here to maintain. We're here to innovate. In her first week, she held a town hall and announced the Efficiency Initiative. Every department would be analyzed for redundancy. Legacy processes would be eliminated. Decision-making would be centralized under executive leadership. I sat in the back row taking notes. When she said vendor management will report directly to operations, I underlined it twice. After the meeting, I approached her assistant and requested a one-on-one. Just to brief the new leadership on compliance requirements. The assistant looked at me like I'd asked to explain dirt. Victoria's calendar is full for the next month. Send a summary deck. I did. 32 slides detailing our vendor authorization structure, regulatory touchpoints, and the legal framework binding our certifications. She never opened it. I know because I embedded a read receipt. The mockery started in smaller meetings. Kyle from operations, a 32-year-old who thought supply chain management meant tracking Amazon packages, started calling my work Stone Age bureaucracy. During a procurement sync, he pulled up one of my compliance checklists and laughed. Do we really need 17 steps to approve a vendor? This isn't NASA. I kept my voice level. Actually, 3 of our clients are NASA subcontractors. So yes, we do. He rolled his eyes. Victoria, sitting at the head of the table, nodded along with him. Kyle raises a good point. We need to move faster. Dana, can't we automate most of this? I leaned forward slightly. Automation requires a certified officer to input the authorization parameters. If the parameters are wrong, the entire system fails regulatory review. She waved a hand dismissively. We'll figure it out. Let's not be held hostage by paperwork. I wrote down her exact words. Paperwork. That's what she thought compliance was. Not the legal scaffolding preventing federal fines, contract breaches, and production shutdowns. Just paperwork. I tried the proper channels. I scheduled a meeting with HR to flag the risks of removing compliance oversight without a transition plan. The HR director, a man named Brent who'd been promoted for his ability to nod aggressively during executive meetings, sat across from me with a sympathetic smile that meant nothing. Dana, we're not eliminating compliance. We're realigning it. I slid a printed document across the table. This is the vendor authorization structure. Every contract renewal requires a certified officer's digital signature. If I'm removed without transferring that authority, the system locks. He glanced at the document like it was written in hieroglyphics. I'm sure operations can handle it. I pulled out another sheet. This is the federal regulation requiring certified personnel for international shipments. Halcyon has vendors in Germany, Taiwan, South Korea, and Mexico. Without proper authorization, customs will freeze everything. Brent's smile tightened. We're simply realigning, Dana. The decision has been made. I stood up, gathered my documents, and walked out. That night, I printed every vendor certification, every contract clause, every renewal timeline. I saved them to an encrypted flash drive, labeled it Compliance Archive, DXC Personal, and locked it in my desk drawer. The pre-exit meeting happened in Victoria's glass-walled office. She didn't offer me a seat. Dana, we appreciate your contributions, but the company is moving in a different direction. Your role no longer fits our operational model. I nodded. Understood. I'll need to schedule a handover with whoever is assuming compliance authority. She shook her head. That won't be necessary. Operations will absorb vendor management. Kyle will oversee it. I kept my face neutral. Kyle isn't certified. He can't legally authorize vendor renewals under ISO or federal trade compliance. Victoria's jaw tightened. Then he'll get certified. I pulled out my phone and opened a document. Certification takes 6 months and requires documented field experience. We have vendor renewals due in 8 days. She leaned back in her chair. We'll survive, Dana. You're not as indispensable as you think. I placed my phone on her desk, showing the authorization dashboard. This system requires my biometric login. If my access is revoked before a certified replacement is registered, every vendor contract goes into pending status. Shipments stop. She glanced at the screen, then back at me. We'll handle it internally. I picked up my phone. Then I'll make sure everything is compliant before I leave. My last day was a Tuesday. I arrived early, before the fluorescent lights warmed up fully. I cleaned my desk slowly, methodically. Photo frames, coffee mug, the succulent that had survived 3 office moves. I logged into the vendor authorization system one final time and ran a compliance diagnostic. 73 vendors. 61 active contracts. 12 renewals pending within the next 30 days. I generated a final report, emailed it to myself with a CC to my personal legal counsel, and titled it Final Compliance Verification, All Outstanding Issues Documented. Then I opened the contract clause repository and pulled up section 11.3 of my employment agreement. In the event of termination, all digital authorization credentials shall be transferred via written executive approval to a certified replacement. Failure to complete transfer within 72 hours renders all dependent contracts subject to regulatory review. I didn't delete anything. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply logged out. When IT came to collect my laptop, I handed it over with a calm smile. All files are backed up per protocol. You'll find the compliance archive in the shared drive under my name. They nodded, unaware that the shared drive only contained surface-level summaries. The real keys were biometric. That night, at 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was an automated notification from the vendor authorization system. Supplier authorization renewal request, Helix Components GmbH, 48 hours to confirm. Helix was one of our critical suppliers. They provided precision bearings for aerospace clients. Their contract was worth $18 million annually. I stared at the notification. My finger hovered over the screen. I could authorize it. One tap. Problem solved. But I wasn't employed by Halcyon anymore. And legally, I couldn't authorize contracts for a company I didn't work for. I archived the message and set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. Across town, Victoria was probably celebrating her clean sweep. Efficiency achieved. Legacy processes eliminated. She had no idea that in 48 hours, the first domino would fall. And unlike buzzwords and TED Talks, supply chains don't care about confidence. They care about compliance. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker. Somewhere in Germany, a shipment was waiting for a signature that would never come. The next morning, IT revoked my system access. I wasn't there to see it happen, but I knew the exact moment. 9 a.m. sharp. Policy dictated that terminated employees lose credentials within 24 hours. My login disappeared from the authorization system like I'd never existed. But the system didn't forget me. It just flagged everything I'd been responsible for as pending authorization. 73 vendors. 61 active contracts. All of them suddenly orphaned. I imagined the dashboard lighting up in procurement, red warnings cascading across the screen. But no one would notice yet. Red flags are easy to ignore when you don't understand what they mean. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Brent from HR. Hi Dana, just following up on some administrative loose ends. Could you give me a call back when you have a moment? Thanks. I deleted the message. Administrative loose ends. That's what he called the collapsing infrastructure. I didn't call back. I didn't owe them my time anymore. Instead, I opened my laptop and updated my LinkedIn profile. Available for consulting, supply chain compliance and vendor authorization systems. Within an hour, I had 3 messages from recruiters. One of them was from Halcyon's biggest competitor. 2 days after my access was revoked, the first freeze hit. It started with Helix Components. Their automated system detected that the renewal authorization hadn't been submitted within the required timeframe. Protocol dictated an automatic shipment pause until compliance was restored. At 2:14 p.m., Kyle from operations received an email. Shipment 4472B on hold pending certification renewal. Contact compliance officer for resolution. Kyle, who had been busy consolidating vendor spreadsheets into a color-coded masterpiece, forwarded the email to Victoria. Not sure what this means. Can we just approve it manually? Victoria, mid-meeting with the board, replied, handle it. That's your job now. Kyle opened the vendor portal and tried to click approve. The system prompted him for biometric verification. He scanned his fingerprint. Error, user not certified. Authorization restricted to licensed compliance officer. He tried again. Same error. He called IT. Hey, I need admin access to the vendor system. IT replied, that requires executive approval and federal certification. Do you have your compliance license number? Kyle hung up. By 4 p.m., 3 more vendors had frozen shipments. By the end of the day, the procurement dashboard looked like a crime scene. The panic started quietly. An analyst named Fiona noticed the red flags first. She'd been with Halcyon for 3 years and had worked adjacent to my department. She understood enough to know that red meant bad. She knocked on Kyle's office door. Kyle? All the supplier dashboards just went red. I tried refreshing, but it's not a glitch. They're all showing authorization expired. Kyle looked up from his laptop, annoyed. Just refresh it again. Fiona's voice cracked slightly. I did. It says we need a certified compliance officer to reauthorize. That's Dana's role. Was Dana's role. Kyle's face went pale. He opened the dashboard himself. 73 vendors. Red across the board. He grabbed his phone and called Victoria. We have a problem. Victoria was in her car, heading to a dinner meeting. What kind of problem? Kyle's voice was tight. Every vendor is frozen. The system says we need Dana's credentials to unlock them. There was a long pause. Then Victoria's voice, cold and sharp. Find another way. We don't need her. Kyle stared at the screen. I don't think we have another way. Victoria hung up. Fiona stood in the doorway, pale. What do we do? Kyle didn't answer. He was too busy Googling how to override vendor authorization systems. The first result was a federal compliance manual, 700 pages long. By the next morning, the blame game was in full swing. Victoria called an emergency leadership meeting. Kyle blamed IT for not transferring credentials properly. IT blamed procurement for not documenting the process. Procurement blamed legacy systems for being too complicated. No one said Dana's name out loud. Not yet. But it hung in the room like smoke. Finally, Brent from HR cleared his throat. Wasn't Dana the certifying officer for all of this? The room went silent. Victoria's jaw clenched. She was. But she's gone now. We need to move forward. Kyle pulled up the vendor portal on the conference room screen. The system won't let us. Every vendor requires her biometric authorization. We can't fake that. Someone from operations muttered, can we just call the vendors directly? Fiona shook her head. I tried. They won't bypass the system. It's in their contracts. No authorization, no shipments. Victoria slammed her hand on the table. Then get her authorization. Kyle blinked. She doesn't work here anymore. Victoria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I don't care. Find a way. We have clients waiting on shipments. If we breach those contracts, we're finished. No one moved. Finally, someone whispered, should we call Dana? Victoria's glare could have melted steel. Absolutely not. But they had no choice. By the afternoon, Kyle was desperately trying to contact Helix Components account manager. He called their main line. Automated system. He emailed their general contact. Bounced back. He tried LinkedIn. The account manager's profile said, only accepts messages from certified contacts. He slammed his laptop shut. This is insane. Fiona leaned over. The account manager only responds to Dana. They've worked together for 5 years. Kyle's head dropped into his hands. Across the ocean, shipments from Germany and Taiwan were sitting in customs. Without proper authorization, they couldn't clear. Another vendor, this time in South Korea, sent a formal notice. Contract breach imminent. Authorization required within 24 hours or penalties apply. Operations tried to bypass the system by creating a new admin account. They assigned Kyle full permissions and tried to authorize a renewal. The system flagged it immediately. Unauthorized access attempt logged. Compliance audit triggered. Kyle stared at the screen in horror. What does that mean? IT pulled up the notification. It means the system just automatically requested a regulatory audit. That's federal. They'll be here in 72 hours. Victoria was called back to the office. She arrived at 6 p.m., her dinner plans ruined, her face tight with rage. How did this happen? No one answered. Because everyone knew. They'd fired the only person who knew how to keep the system alive. The audit notice arrived the next morning. Official letterhead. Federal Trade Compliance Bureau. Automated compliance review triggered. Inspection scheduled in 24 hours. Victoria read it 3 times. Then she called legal. Can we delay this? The lawyer, a woman named Keisha who billed $400 an hour, sighed. No. Automated audits are non-negotiable. If you're flagged, they show up. And if you're non-compliant, you're fined. Or shut down. Victoria's hands trembled. What do they need? Keisha pulled up the requirements. Proof of authorized vendor certifications. Digital logs showing certified officer approval. Evidence of compliance with international shipping regulations. Victoria looked at Kyle. Can you pull those logs? Kyle opened his laptop. The logs are tied to Dana's credentials. I can't access them. Keisha's voice was flat. Then you're going to fail the audit. Victoria stood up, pacing. There has to be a way to override this. Keisha shook her head. Not legally. The certification system is designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. You can't just swap out compliance officers without proper transition. Victoria stopped pacing. Who approved Dana's termination without a transition plan? Everyone looked at her. She'd approved it. Alone. In her rush to streamline. Keisha closed her laptop. I'd recommend calling Dana. Immediately. Victoria refused. We're not begging her. Find another solution. But there was no other solution. Legal confirmed it. IT confirmed it. Even the vendor portal's customer support confirmed it. Biometric authorizations are irreversible. Only the original officer can transfer credentials. Kyle, desperate, suggested creating a fake authorization. Keisha shot him down instantly. That's fraud. Federal crime. You'll go to prison. The clock ticked down. 23 hours until the audit. Victoria locked herself in her office. She pulled up Dana's personnel file. Spotless record. 7 years. 0 violations. 3 commendations. She'd fired her in front of 40 people. She scrolled to Dana's contact info. Her finger hovered over the phone number. Pride fought with panic. Panic won. She dialed. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then voicemail. You've reached Dana Cross. I'm currently unavailable. Please leave a message. Victoria's voice cracked. Dana, it's Victoria Hale. We need to discuss some urgent compliance issues. Please call me back as soon as possible. She hung up. The voicemail sat in my inbox. I was sitting in a sleek glass office across town. The competitor who'd messaged me on LinkedIn had flown me out for an in-person meeting. They offered me a 6-figure consulting contract on the spot. Your system is the cleanest we've ever seen. We want you to build the same thing for us. I accepted. I didn't check my voicemail until later that night. When I finally listened to Victoria's message, I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching gravity do its work. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted a single email. Subject line, Compliance Transition Requirements. Body, per Section 11.3 of my employment contract, all vendor authorization transfers require written executive approval prior to termination. This was not completed. As I am no longer employed by Halcyon Tech, I am legally unable to authorize contracts on your behalf. I recommend consulting with legal regarding regulatory requirements for emergency recertification. I attached a PDF. It was the contract clause I'd flagged months ago. The one no one had read. I hit send. Then I poured a glass of wine and turned off my phone. Across town, Victoria was in an emergency overnight meeting. The countdown clock on the conference room screen read, 18 hours 42 minutes and 7 seconds. 18 hours until the auditors arrived. Kyle had stopped trying to fix the system. He was just staring at the red dashboard, exhausted. Brent from HR was drafting a press release in case they needed to announce a production shutdown. Legal was on standby to negotiate with regulators. And Victoria, the woman who'd called me obsolete infrastructure, was reading my email over and over. Her hands were shaking. The vendor storm hit at dawn. Emails flooded in from every supplier. Shipment suspended pending compliance review. Contract breach penalties initiated. Authorization required within 12 hours or termination clause activates. Halcyon's factory floor went silent. Assembly lines stopped. Workers stood around, confused. One of the production managers called operations. We're out of components. Nothing's coming in. What's going on? Kyle, who hadn't slept, could barely form words. Compliance issue. We're working on it. The production manager's voice rose. We have a delivery deadline in 3 days. If we miss it, the client cancels. That's a $12 million contract. Kyle hung up. He couldn't handle it anymore. He walked into Victoria's office without knocking. We need Dana. Now. Victoria looked up from her laptop. Her eyes were bloodshot. I called her. She didn't respond. Kyle's voice cracked. Then call her again. Beg if you have to. Because in 6 hours, auditors are going to walk through that door and shut us down. Victoria stared at him. Then slowly, she picked up her phone. She dialed my number again. This time, I answered. My voice was calm. Professional. This is Dana. Victoria's voice broke. Dana, please. We need your help. The audit is in 6 hours. We can't access the vendor system without you. Name your price. I let the silence stretch. Not because I wanted to torture her, but because I wanted her to hear it. The sound of desperation. The sound of a woman who'd called someone obsolete realizing she'd amputated her own legs. Finally, I spoke. Victoria, I sent you an email. Did you read it? Her voice was tight. Yes. The contract clause. I understand. We made a mistake. I almost laughed. A mistake. Like forgetting to CC someone on an email. Not like dismantling the entire compliance framework of a federally regulated company. Victoria, I can't help you. Her voice rose. Dana, please. I'll pay you whatever you want. Consultant rates. Double your salary. Just sign the authorizations. I took a slow breath. It's not about money. I'm legally prohibited from authorizing contracts for a company I don't work for. You terminated me without completing the transfer. That makes any authorization I provide invalid. The auditors would flag it immediately. Silence. Then quietly, what do we do? I glanced at my new contract sitting on my desk. Signed. Sealed. You follow the emergency recertification process. It takes 6 to 8 weeks. You'll fail the audit. You'll lose vendors. You'll pay fines. But eventually, you'll rebuild. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. We don't have 6 weeks. I know, I thought. Then you should have read the handover document I sent you 6 months ago. I hung up. The board emergency session happened at 7 a.m. Victoria sat at the head of the table, pale and hollow-eyed. The CFO opened the meeting. Let's be very clear. How did we get here? No one spoke. Then one of the board members, an older woman named Claudia who'd been skeptical of Victoria from the start, leaned forward. Victoria, did you approve the termination of our compliance officer without ensuring a transition plan? Victoria's throat worked. I believed operations could absorb the function. Claudia's voice was ice. You believed. Did you consult legal? Silence. Did you consult procurement? Silence. Did you consult anyone with regulatory experience? Victoria's voice cracked. I was trying to streamline. Claudia slammed her hand on the table. You gutted us. Do you understand what happens if we fail this audit? We lose our federal contracts. We lose our ISO certification. We lose our clients. This company dies. The CFO pulled up a financial projection. If we lose our top 3 clients due to breach penalties, we're looking at $40 million in losses. First quarter. Victoria looked like she might be sick. Claudia turned to the rest of the board. I'm calling for an immediate vote. Victoria Hale should be removed as CEO effective today. The vote was unanimous. Victoria didn't even fight it. She just stood up and walked out. At 9 a.m., the auditors arrived. 2 federal inspectors with clipboards and the kind of polite, terrifying calm that comes from holding absolute authority. They asked for the compliance officer. Kyle, now acting operations lead, stammered. We're in a transition period. The lead auditor raised an eyebrow. Who is your currently certified officer? Kyle swallowed. We don't have one. The auditor made a note. Then this facility is operating out of compliance. We'll need to see all vendor authorization logs for the past 90 days. Kyle pulled up the system. Read across the board. The auditor leaned in. Took a photo. These are all expired? Kyle nodded. The auditor turned to his colleague. Flag this for immediate review. We'll need a full site inspection. For the next 4 hours, they tore through every record. They found gaps everywhere. Unsigned renewals. Missing certifications. Unapproved shipments. By 1 p.m., they delivered their preliminary report. Critical non-compliance. Production suspension recommended until certified officer is reinstated. Kyle's phone buzzed. It was the CFO. The board wants an update. Kyle typed back, "We're being shut down." That afternoon, I was in my new office when my phone rang. It was Claudia from Halcyon's board. "Dana, this is Claudia Ferraro. I'm calling on behalf of the board. Victoria is no longer with the company." I leaned back in my chair. I heard. Her voice was careful. "We're prepared to offer you reinstatement. Full benefits. Salary increase. Stock options. Whatever it takes." I looked out the window. "I appreciate the offer, Claudia, but I'm under contract with another company now." She paused. "Can we buy out your contract?" I smiled. "My new employer values compliance. They're not interested in selling." Claudia sighed. "Dana, I understand you have every right to walk away. But there are 300 people at Halcyon who didn't fire you. People who rely on this company for their livelihoods." That landed. I thought of Fiona. Of the production workers standing idle. Of the people who'd quietly respected my work even when leadership didn't. "I'll consult," I said finally. "Hourly rate. I'll help you through the emergency recertification. But I'm not coming back." Claudia exhaled. "Thank you. That's more than we deserve." I hung up. Then I opened my calendar and blocked out the next 6 weeks. Not because I owed them, but because I owed the people who'd actually understood what I did. The audit report was brutal. Systemic compliance failure due to leadership negligence. Federal contracts suspended pending recertification. Fines totaling $470,000. Mandatory oversight for 12 months. Halcyon stock dropped 23% in a single day. Clients pulled contracts. Vendors demanded penalty fees. The factory floor stayed dark for 3 weeks. I walked back into that building as a consultant, not an employee. My rate was triple what they'd paid me before. I didn't work from my old desk. I worked from a conference room, coming and going as I pleased. Kyle, humbled and exhausted, became my assistant. He followed every instruction without complaint. Slowly, painstakingly, we rebuilt the vendor authorization system. I trained 3 new compliance officers. I documented every process. I made sure that if I walked away again, they could survive. It took 6 weeks. When the recertification audit came back approved, Claudia called me personally. "Thank you, Dana. You saved us." I didn't say "you're welcome." I said, "Next time, don't hire someone who thinks compliance is just paperwork." Claudia laughed, but it was a tired sound. "Noted." I submitted my final invoice. Packed up my things. Walked out of Halcyon for the last time. The fallout for Victoria was swift. Her name became industry shorthand for reckless cost-cutting. No board would touch her. She ended up at a mid-tier consultancy, writing think pieces about operational efficiency that no one read. Kyle left Halcyon 6 months later. He went to a smaller company, one that valued process over buzzwords. He sent me a message once. "I'm sorry I didn't listen. You were right about everything." I didn't reply. I didn't need his apology. Meanwhile, my former coworkers started reaching out. The ones who'd watched me get humiliated and said nothing. They wanted to connect on LinkedIn. They wanted coffee. They wanted advice. I ignored most of them. But Fiona, who'd tried to warn people, who'd understood the red flags, I took her call. "I'm looking for a new role," she said. "Somewhere that respects compliance." I forwarded her resume to my new employer. She got hired within a week. The people who'd quietly respected the work, who'd understood that infrastructure isn't glamorous but it's necessary, they remembered. And when I built my consulting practice, they became my network. The ones who'd laughed, who'd called my work obsolete, they stayed stuck. Efficiency doesn't age well when it's built on ignorance. 2 years later, I was keynoting at a supply chain conference. The topic: Why Compliance Officers Are the Unsung Heroes of Modern Manufacturing. The audience was full of executives, many of whom were there because their companies had failed audits. I didn't name Halcyon specifically. I didn't need to. I told the story in broad strokes. A CEO who prioritized speed over structure. A termination without transition. A system that collapsed because leadership didn't understand the difference between redundancy and necessity. When I finished, the applause was long and genuine. Afterward, a young woman approached me. I'm a compliance officer at a tech firm. My CEO keeps calling my work bureaucratic overhead. I looked at her. Document everything. Print your certifications. Back up your authorization logs. And when they try to fire you, make sure they know exactly what they're losing. She smiled. Already doing it. I handed her my card. If they don't listen, call me. We're always hiring. She walked away, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not vindication. Not revenge. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the people who do the invisible work, the people who keep the gears turning, we're not disposable. We're the foundation. And foundations don't beg to be noticed. They just hold everything up. I'm sitting in my office now, overlooking the city. My consulting firm has 12 employees. We specialize in supply chain compliance and vendor authorization systems. We're booked solid for the next 18 months. Yesterday, I got an email from a recruiter. Our client is looking for a chief compliance officer. 7-figure salary. Interested? I didn't even open the full message. I'm not interested in being anyone's employee anymore. I'm interested in building systems that can't be dismantled by someone who thinks efficiency means cutting the people who understand how things actually work. Halcyon survived, barely. They're smaller now. Cautious. They hired a new CEO who spent her first 6 months just rebuilding trust with vendors. I heard through the network that they framed my final compliance report and hung it in the operations wing. A reminder. Every so often, someone from my old life reaches out. They want to know how I did it. How I walked away and landed on my feet. I tell them the truth. I didn't plan revenge. I just made sure the work was documented. The rest was gravity. They called me redundant. Turns out, I was the system's only key. And when they threw me away, they locked themselves out. Thank you for watching this story. If moments like these resonate with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who couldn't see you, then you're not alone. We share stories like this every single day, real accounts of people who found their voice, set their boundaries, and walked into the life they deserved. Subscribe so you never miss the next upload, and share your own story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. I love you all.